All that work to make a trade board, and less than a week later, there's new people on the market. Welcome into the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by Bet365. We got Big E and Rudo coming to you live on a Wednesday. Four Nation tournament kicking off tonight. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But look, when does silly season officially start? When does this count as silly season, or is that only the week of the deadline?
Well, I'm trying to remember anything close to this where you're very close to playoffs. You're only a few games away from the deadline, and there's a 2.5 week break. You know what I mean? With no freeze.
Historically, the deadline is on the front side of this, right? But
yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, okay, you know what I mean? So some GMs probably take a few days off, you know what I mean, if they're not involved. Again, if there are teams, I mean, it seems like USA's got 18 GMs and, from the league, and Canada's got 18. I mean, there's a lot of guys involved, but again, I'm just joking. But, there's still a boatload of teams, like Chris, for example, that's not part of any team. And I think you get away from it for a few days. And then I think after that, I think it's just human nature. You get back on the drawing board, and then you're making meetings, and you getting resolved. It's free time. There's no craziness. Listen, a game day in the National Hockey League for the front office is nuts. You know what I mean? It is because of whatever it is, like the roster purposes, everything good. You know what I mean? From the cap compliance to, are we good? Is somebody sick? Somebody just showed up that morning. 2 guys are sick. Got to call up. But the Eagles are in Rockford. They're not. There's a snowstorm in Rockford. I mean, every day there's just something. Logistically, it's just a nightmare. And then you're getting back, and then you're dealing with your coach on that he's struggling with a player X, and then how are we doing on this? And it's just nonstop. And then you're dealing with injuries. Where are we at? Somebody else got hurt the night before. God, are we calling guys up now? So right now it's kind of like a little vacation. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it gives you time to concentrate on your plan coming up. Hey, listen, if you're hitting this year the trade deadline without a plan, you should be shot. You know what I mean? You should be fired. You know what I mean? So any team. I mean, right now you got plenty of time. You can assume everything. Again, you get on those Zoom calls. You get guys flying in. You just sit with your coach. You go to dinner. It's such a crazy environment that usually every day today is. Day-to-day is nuts, where this is calm right now. You're not mad the night before from having a big loss, and then you're acting on, you're reacting to something, or, so it's so crazy, so different this year. I'm excited for it, and, I think Chris has shown this year especially, and again, not just this year, but this year especially, he hasn't been afraid to go and fix things if he feels that they need to, or do things that they need to get done.
Yeah, the Avs have clearly made it obvious they're willing to make moves if they think it's the right moves for the franchise. So that's what we're going to get into today. As the other day, it was rumored, leaked, whatever you want to call it, that the Seattle Kraken are apparently shopping Jared McCann. This is an interesting one for a lot of reasons. Obviously, McCann's a great player. He's 28. He's right in the middle of his prime. So there's a lot to like here. He's having a solid season, and he's on a fantastic contract. I think that's part of the key here. $5 million through the next 2 seasons after this one, too, for a guy that's probably a 60 to 70 point guy pretty automatically right now in this part of his career. The thing is, and Chad has already talked about this, McCann did play center earlier in his career, but since his breakout in Seattle, he really has not played very much center. He's been a wing there. A lot of his goal scoring has come from the wing. So I'm curious, does McCann even make sense for Colorado?
Well, I mean, again, if you're looking to add some, God, I'm going to scare some people here. Here's what I'm going to say. Like, Val Natushka. Again, I don't know what's going on. We haven't seen, again, it's been up and down, and he's got that lower body injury. What if, you're not going to see that player, or there's a doubt that you're not going to see him, and it might be a doubt that, it's not going to fully heal or whatever it is. You're going to need some help, as we've seen. It'd be nice to get a little bit of help on the wing. Um, there's a reason he's produced a lot on the wing in Seattle, right? Because he hasn't played center.
Yeah.
Um, Center position is tough, guys. It's tough. You know that, Rudo. Different responsibilities, different. A lot easier to play wing. A lot easier to concentrate on putting the puck in the net. Um, Maybe he's more suited to be a winger. Obviously, he's showing that he's more suited to be a winger. Now, ice time or whatever it is, obviously he's fit in quite nice with Seattle, and he's had a more prominent sort of role than maybe he did before that in Vancouver, Pittsburgh. Who knows? There was a time that he had some quality ice time in Pittsburgh, and maybe it wasn't the case all the time. You know what I mean? And so somewhere somehow, does that make sense? I mean, I think for me, this what makes sense is the center position, like we talk about all the time. They do need an extra center. I think if you're making do somehow, you know what I mean, if you're using them at center, because then you're using again like Parker, and you know what I mean, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, you're just making, oh, they're wingers, but they can play center. You know what I mean? And I think if you're going to get Jared McCann, it's because you're going to get him because there's a hole somewhere on your wings or on your top six wing, or you made a different deal, and he's certainly going to help because I like him. I like the way he plays the game. I like the way that he's mature at 28 right now with 4 solid seasons. Um, I thought he was good in the playoffs a couple years ago. McCarr smacked him there by again, that's why Kales gets booed there in Seattle, but. But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be interesting. It's an interesting name, and I mean, he's well signed. I mean, like he's a nice number. So maybe Seattle's looking at doing some different things and looking at different things, and trying to change a little bit what has not worked really as a team in the last couple of years.
So let me ask you this, Thinny. No interest in bringing him in as a center?
I mean, for me, he's a winger. You know,
Okay. All right. So
and
let
that's
me let,
yeah,
let me go to David Nola in the chat then. Would you consider moving
yep.
Natchez to center to make room for McCann on the wing?
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. If you're going to get him, is because there's a need on the wing. Now, if you're moving Natchez to center, then you have a need on the wing, right? You know what I mean? And that's what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? So I think that if you're going to get him to put him at center, not my favorite. Not my favorite move because I do believe he's a better winger than a center, and I think he's. I mean, the numbers, production wise, have shown it. Uh, I yeah, but God, I don't want to put Natchez away from Mac. I mean, those two are lethal right now. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, as much as I kept saying all the time, I want to see Miko with Casey on the second line and split them up. I don't know. I'm having a love affair right now between Mac and Natchez together. So, well, that's a good point, though. That's a fair point.
I, if you really wanted to, I'm saying you can make it work. And I will say that the Avs very clearly over the past 12 months have not been afraid of taking guys from the wing and trying them at center. Sometimes it's worked out pretty well. Sometimes it's worked out pretty poorly. You look at a Parker Kelly, it very clearly hasn't worked. But if you go to last season, they had great success in their depth with honestly just about anyone at center. Trennan maybe the most successful of the bunch after they acquired him, but it can work. I'm with you. I think it's a lot harder to play center in this league. It's a lot harder to be especially defensively responsible enough as a center, and that puts pressure on a guy who, let's be honest, if the Avs are targeting an archetype of a player like Jared McCann, they're bringing him in to first and foremost score goals for them. If you're
Yep.
looking at a guy like McCann, I don't want people to get too wrapped up. 2 seasons ago, he scored 40 goals, yada, yada, yada. His shooting percentage was like almost double his career shooting percentage. That's not really who he is. He's probably a 25 to 30 maybe a
Yep.
35 goal guy in a normal year. This year, his goal scoring is actually down quite a bit. Part of that is because Seattle plays really boring, awful hockey and they're bad, but his goal scoring is also down. So don't fool yourself into thinking this is a 40 goal scorer. Yes, he did that once, but that's not really who he is.
No, exactly. And I think the Avs where they're at, and that's why I'm saying like, this especially this week and obviously the last few months, and targeting players are, I don't think you're at a stage now. This is just me, going to make a deal, and then you have 18 games left, 20 games left in the season to try to make someone see if they can fit well at a different position that they've played all year. You know what I mean? And that's where I'm a little bit apprehensive to do that. I think it's more if you're going to get them, there's a need. You know what I mean? There's a need, and there's a need for a reason. You know what I mean? Like so, and that's why I was saying Matushkin or whoever. You know what I mean? And or you're moving on from someone to go get help on D, or you know what I mean? You're trading Mr. X that's on the wing, and you're going to get a D, and now you're thin a little bit on the wing, so you go get Jared McCann. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I don't think you go get him to become one of your C's. It does protect you, because crap happens in the playoffs and, injuries and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, oh, but this guy can play center, you know what I mean? So he wouldn't be, like we saw Nylander last year. It was in the playoffs. All of a sudden he played center, right, for the Leafs. And, and is a guy that I'm not saying that Willie Styles is a center, but, he can help you there. We've seen, Miko do it a few times, right? But he's not really a
Yeah.
center, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but they have such high hockey IQ, and guys like that are smart, and they can play both positions. There's a reason. So yeah, I mean, again, I like the addition of Jack Drury. I think that was much needed, right? Much needed. Where it solidifies a lot more things, and then and then somebody in chat was still talking about Ross and Colton, and you know what I mean. Obviously,
Yeah, we'll
played
get to
center
that.
last year. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So, I mean, you do have options, but it seems like the options are not like concrete. You know what I mean? Of like, this is what he is, So,
The way I see it is I think McCann is a pretty big luxury on the wing. If you want to play him at center, if the Avs believes he can be a center, it becomes less of a luxury and more of a very interesting option. I will say this, and Blake said it in the chat a little while ago. McCann's numbers are very good both ways. Both on the wing in Seattle, he's had solid defensive metrics. And then back earlier in his career in Pittsburgh, he was
mm-hmm.
arguably elite defensively as a center in Pittsburgh. The problem is
Yep.
those Pittsburgh numbers were his offenses was poor. He was struggling to generate offense effectively in Pittsburgh as a
Yeah.
center. So the Avs cannot really afford to go out and get a guy that's going to be an offensive black hole. Now, how much of his offensive increase is moving to wing and how much of that is him maturing and being in his prime and figuring the NHL out? It's probably some of both, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there is an argument to be made there. Again, in a perfect world, if salary cap was no thing, if the Avs could do this Xbox style, as you like to say, and give up
yeah.
no roster players to go get Jared McCann, Jared McCann would be, to me, he'd be like Andre Burakovsky was for the Avs in the Cup year. If the Avs have a perfectly healthy lineup, so you have Lehkonen, McKinnon, Nichushkin, Druin, Middlestat, whoever, not McCann as your top six forward. If you have Jared McCann as a goal scoring winger on your third line that also provides quality defensive metrics, that's a Stanley Cup caliber team.
Yeah, for sure.
That that's where I'm at with it. If you're going out to get him in your top six, he's still a good pickup, but it feels like you're buying a luxury there when you need to be targeting something maybe more effective to fix your problems. So I do want to get into what he might cost as well, but first we do have to take a break here, as we are brought to you by the official craft beer of DNVR in Breckenridge Brewery. You can go find yourself some in any liquor store in the country. If you haven't found it, all 50 states carry Breck Brew now. They have dozens of flavors, something for everybody. If you like any kind of beer, I guarantee you they have a beer for you. So make sure you're going and checking them out. You can go over to breckbrew.com to find it near you at a local liquor store with their Breck Beer Locator. You can also get it at the DNVR bar. If you have an Avalanche during an Avs game at the DNVR bar, they're $2 off. So you can also get a great deal on Breckenridge Brewery. They're a ton more than that, too. They're an awesome company. If you've never been out to the Breck Farmhouse or any of their other options, Breck Brew is great. Highly recommend. Love their beer, love their stuff. A lot of people love their merch, too. Everyone says their hats are awesome. So if you want their hats, you can get those at breckbrew.com, too. Go check them out. Again, Breck Brew is the official beer of DNVR, craft beer, at least. We like our Coors Light, too. You can go either way. And then we're brought to you by Bet365. If you want to go win yourself some money, and spoiler alert, this deal is ending very soon. But if you sign up today with code DNVR365, you can get $150 in bonus bets just for betting $5 on anything, win or lose. You don't even have to successfully hit the bet. You'll get $150 in bonus bets. Again, make sure you get on it before it goes away. Bet365, you can bet on everything under the sun. Four Nations later tonight, you can bet on that. The rest of the NHL season, you can bet on that. NBA, you can bet on that. I forget the name of the football league that plays when the NFL isn't playing, but you can bet on that too. So go jump in on it with Bet365. Use that DNVR365 code when you download the app with that QR code on screen there. Bet365 is a load of fun. Highly recommend. The bonus bets, it's just free money to play with, so you might as well go enjoy yourself with it. When you do sign up with Bet365, of course, you must be 21 or older, physically located in Colorado, and if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER today. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. McCann would be very expensive. Again, this comes back to that contract. He has 2 additional years after this year at $5 million for a guy that you're realistically calling a 60 to 70 point guy. That is a really good contract for a guy like that. It is not going to be cheap to drag someone like McCann out of Seattle, especially with, it's Ron Francis and he hates to make trades at all. But do the Avs even have the assets to pry someone like Jared McCann out of there?
Great question. Great question. You can always figure out the assets, and sometimes people are going to say like, "Oh, but they don't have that second or that first." Well, you can use a roster player to go get that first with a different team, and then make that. A lot of times you can't just look at the chart and say, "Oh, they don't have it." Well, that's when it becomes a little harder and may put you a little bit more work to do. But I think to answer your question, I think it depends on Seattle. What is their game plan? What is their plan? You're talking about CMAC this week and gathering with his staff and going to dinner with the coach and seeing what's going on and what is Seattle trying to do? You know what I mean? Like where are they? You know what I mean? They obviously not going to make the playoffs this year. It doesn't look like it. They waived Grubauer the other day, so they're shedding some stuff there. They didn't make the playoffs last year. They got a new coach. It hasn't worked. So what are they trying to do? And when we all know in the NHL, it's you got to win now, or you got to make coaches fired or trades or whatever it is, and change your thought process a little bit. But it sounds like they might be going into a different spin. You know what I mean? If you're listening, the word McCann, where 2 years ago, he's one of their top guys, right? And he still is. I'm saying, but when they had team success, he was one of their top guys. Now it's like they went on the free agent path last summer, right? They got Stevenson, they got Montour, they got, a bunch of guys, to lengthy contracts, lots of money. So what are you looking to do?
Are they a bit more committed? I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, you see what I mean? And then is that a match for you? I see. We have an extra second and fourth. Whatever. Great. I don't think a second rounder, makes it. For McCann, I think they're going to demand more. Yeah, and I don't think you throw in a fourth. That's I'm not saying we're saying second and a fourth. It just wouldn't make it. Because they'll probably get it somewhere else, the first rounder. You know what I mean? So if you're the Avs, Zach, I don't think you trade your first for him. That's me. I mean, that's, again.
If Seattle wants futures, I guarantee you they can get a first for Jared McCann. I'll tell you that.
Exactly.
It's just like you said, it's a question of do they want to go with picks, or is this try to rebuild on the fly because of the commitments they've made with some of these long deals? They may be much more interested in roster players.
They might be, exactly. And then, and what are you willing to do if you're Chris or or
Yeah,
Chat right
for
here?
sure.
What are we willing to give? You know what I mean? Like somebody said, what's their acquisition? Exactly. It all comes down to, hey, you want to get him for a seventh round pick? Great. You know what I mean? If you can fit him in your
Me too,
salary,
buddy. Me
great,
too.
awesome. Like no problem. But what is it? Where's that threshold? And that's why I say Xbox all the time. Because on Xbox, it's easy. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't
Yeah,
matter. And then
just add
you
a fifth
turn off
round
the
pick.
Xbox.
Yeah,
You go get supper, right? You know what I mean? It's not a big
yeah.
deal. Like this, this is a little different. Where's your threshold? Where do you get to? And I mean, I've been in meetings. I've been in trade deadline meetings that it's like, guys, guys, please grab me if I'm about to give up our first rounder. Take a roll of tape me up, throw me in the closet. We're not doing it. And I'll tell you one thing: you get there, and then you're on that pressure, and you're looking at the clock, and then your team's doing good. You think you have a shot at it, and then all of a sudden you give up your first. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh God. You know what I mean? Like it's just the way it is. It's the pressure, and where are you willing to go? You know what I mean? And that's makes it so fun and entertaining and so interesting. And that's why I say those guys are absolutely like studs to be in those positions. There's only 32 in the world, and trust me, it's a tough seat. Boy, I raise my hat to those guys because it's it's not an easy position to be in.
Uh,
So
the other side of this with Seattle is they have very little cap to work with. They're using LTIR with Jordan Eberle on their LTIR pool, but beyond Eberle, there is just not a ton of space. This is not a team where you feel like, hey, you can maybe help your cap a little bit. If you're someone like Colorado, you would be at best going out dollar for dollar on someone like Jared McCann, which Chad has already brought up. Maybe the guy that makes the most sense off of the Avs roster, if you're looking for a swap, might well be Ross Colton.
yeah, I mean that's again dollar for dollar is a key word there. You know what I mean? Depending on what the situation you're in, the other team that you're doing the transaction with, then sometimes it's irrelevant for some teams, and sometimes it is. And then now you have to look and okay, well we can get that asset, but we're gonna have to get rid of one of ours. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's again, where's that threshold? Where are we? If it costs player X, are we doing it? Yes, but not player whatever Z. You know what I mean? Like we're not doing it. So again, and that's why those things take time sometimes. And then all of a sudden, a team loses two players one night, and then all of a sudden there's a panic move, and that's where it all sets in. You know what I mean? And that's why, you know, how come it took so long? Well, again, you just weren't comfortable until you were comfortable, and sometimes there's a lot of intangibles that make you comfortable. Or events.
Alrighty, Ross Colton and a first round pick. Would you say yes?
So we give up Ross Colton and a first for McCann.
Yep. Yep.
I'm going no.
Too much?
Yeah, I'm going no. Yeah, that's just me.
Okay.
And again, ask me if I know more of who's in the lineup. Is Natushkin there? Is he still
Sure.
hurt? Or
Of
is
course.
he? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, ask me a little later when I know more. I might say, yeah, let's go. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm trying to say. Today, no. Uh, you know, I think that's a little rich, but
What's your best offer today for Jared McCann?
like somebody's talking about Galiev, and again, sometimes it's so funny. Teams will ask in return, like they want like 100% a pick, and then you're like, oh yeah, yeah, perfect. But I got Rudo. He's a former first round pick, and they're like, no, no,
Just
no,
kind of
no.
like a first.
We want a pick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't like Rudo.
Sure.
I
Sure.
know you picked. That's why. Or sometimes we like Rudo. We wanted to pick him, and then the Avs pick Rudo 3 picks before our pick, and we were taking him. You know what I mean? So a lot of times it's a little bit of mix of both. I mean, man, I think you give him again, does that get it done? A second rounder and maybe a roster player lower, you know, like Miles Wood or
I mean,
something. I don't know.
like
You know what I
that.
mean?
We all know that second is burning a hole in Chris McFarland's pocket that he got in the Miko trade. So
Yeah.
they're
I
gonna
think
try
that's
and
where
do
he's
it.
at.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's where he's at. Again, I told you a story. Like, tape me up, throw me in the closet. You know what I mean? Don't make me answer the call. You know what I mean? Like, you end
yeah,
up doing it. So I don't know, where are you at? But I would
yeah.
say today, I don't think he's there. Is he there later at 10 in the morning that morning? I don't know. The trade deadline's at 12, or maybe, and to
And
where, you know what I mean? I don't know.
and just to be clear, because chat hasn't brought it up yet, like they usually do, Ross Colton does have a full no trade clause until next
Yeah,
season,
yeah, yeah.
so it would be
Exactly.
hard to make that work with Colton anyway. Um, Other guys wouldn't be as hard. Miles only has a partial no trade. There are some other guys that, depending on what you're interested in giving up as far as a roster player is concerned, that you could work with. But it's, I think you made a good point, E, without knowing where the rest of the Avs wingers are at, and they won't really know until after the Four Nations break, at least. It's hard for me to see how Jared McCann, not that they shouldn't be interested, not that they shouldn't be calling about it, but I don't think he'd be at the top of their list. Put it to you that way.
Yeah, and somebody was asking why would Seattle do, which is a fair question. Why would Seattle do a first in 2026? You know what I mean? It's a
Yeah.
fair question. And why sometimes, as we talked about it earlier a little bit. So if you add it all up, sometimes it's like, well, listen, we're at the cap, right? Like you just talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, all of a sudden, what you're trying to do is, but you want to get this player X, and you need McCann's dollars off the books, and you don't have anything that's better than what the Avs are giving you, which is a 2026 first round. Take it or leave it. You know what I mean? That's why sometimes you're like, okay, we'll bite the bullet because it's 2 years away, which is a fair point. I mean, it's rare that teams will want like a pick 2 years from now. It does happen, but all of a sudden it's like they're not getting anything better, and they really need the dollars off their books because they're getting Rudo, and they got an hour left, and at the end of the day they have to get it done, and that's how you do it. You know what I mean? Of course, nobody wants to. That's a fair point, though. By chat 2026, of course. You know what I mean?
I,
You
I
don't
will
want
say
that.
this is it's often a lot more complicated than that, right? Like, take a look at what
Yeah.
the Avs did with Alex Newhook, right? You trade a player for picks that you immediately take those picks and turn them around into another player because maybe
Mm-hmm.
Seattle is targeting player Y from a bad
Yeah.
team, and player Y says we don't want Jared McCann, we want a first round pick, and so you go
Yeah.
move Jared McCann for a first round pick and a guy, and then you take that first round pick and go get something else, and then it becomes this whole tree of complicated moves that when you look at just one part, it's hard to see the whole picture of what's going on. I'm not saying that's what's
And
going to happen with McCann, but
but then again, that's the hard part. And somebody was asking, how's a trade like made? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
and sometimes it falls apart. And sometimes you're like, thank God it fell apart, because if that part wasn't, if we were going to do that part, then the other part was already done because it got done and the guy didn't keep his word. And you got to remember, sometimes, again, guys usually keep their words because it's a small league. You know what I mean? There's only 32 teams, and if you're really not keeping your word with one guy, and then kind of move on the other way, and then you can't trust the guy, then sometimes it can bite you, and then guys talk to and don't do business with Rudo because he doesn't keep his word. And so guys are usually pretty good at keeping their word. You know what I mean? And then, but sometimes you're like, okay, but we do got to trade. Again, no better than example than last year with the Sean Walker and the Bo Byron deal, right? You're trading Bo Byron for a forward, but it leaves a gaping hole on your back end. And then, you got Sean Walker, which they all happen simultaneously. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
and you got to make sure, and that's the tough part sometimes. And it's like one side's holding the other. Oh, I lost 2 Ds yesterday. I can't trade my D anymore. You're like, you got to be kidding me. You know what I mean? And then it's holding up, and then the other team is calling you. What are you doing? Because you're not telling him that you're also shopping that to
Doing
go
this other
get, and you're
piece.
right.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And
yeah.
and sometimes that's when you facilitate it with a third team, because then they come in and it's done simultaneously, all together, technically on the same sheet. So yeah,
A couple things I want to ask you about there, but we do have to pay some bills
yeah.
first here. So if you want to go, Catch, I guess not the Avs right now, but there are 3 Avs players playing in the game tonight. You can go watch them in person with Game Time. Go get yourself on Game Time today. Download their app, and you can get $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Tickets to just about anything under the sun. And when you use their Game Time Picks feature, you'll get the best tickets. Game Time Picks filters out all the junk just based on your search function. They'll show you the best tickets for the best price, so you're getting a great deal no matter where you want to sit with Game Time. And it's more than just sports, too. You can use Game Time Picks to go to concerts, to theaters, to the movies, you name it. Game Time has you fully covered on pretty much any ticketed event that you can find. Over 15 million people use Game Time to get their tickets, and that DNVR code gets you $20 off your first purchase. Of course, terms apply, but Game Time guarantees you the best ticket prices out there. So get with them today. Go get your tickets to whatever event you might be going to, because what time is it? It's Game Time. Once you've got your tickets, make sure you also have a good way to get to your event, and that's where Toyota comes in. Toyota is the official vehicle of us here at DNVR, and they have a vehicle for everyone. They've got trucks, SUVs, crossovers, sedans, whatever it might be, and all of them have all of the features. 17 different vehicles with all-wheel drive, so it's super snowy here in Colorado. Don't even have to think about that with the Toyota. Easy to drive through that stuff, easy to off-road, easy to go up in the mountains. Toyota has you covered there. They also have 16 different vehicles that are hybrids, so it's not snowy and windy and crazy every day, or maybe you live somewhere warmer. You can help save yourself a little bit of money on gas by getting a Toyota hybrid, getting yourself into work on your daily commute. Again, Toyota has you fully covered no matter where it is, so make sure you get with them at your local Front Range Toyota dealership, including AutoNation Toyota, Arapahoe, Centennial, Gorman Toyota, Boulder, Groove Toyota, Littleton, Mount Stacy Toyota, Denver, Stevenson Toyota, Aurora, and Stevenson Toyota West, and Lakewood. Again, Toyota is the official vehicle of not just us at DNVR, but the Colorado Avalanche too. Toyota, let's go places. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. There's 2 things I want to ask you about here. Number one, we've joked about this on the show all the time, but it's only half a joke. Group chats with a bunch of NHL GMs absolutely exist out there. And
Yes.
I think a lot of people don't understand what NHL GMs do. Like they imagine them sitting in this office signing players and stuff. A lot of what NHL GMs do is communicating and having conversations with other NHL GMs. These guys are constantly talking to each other about player X or player Y, or trying to get a deal done, or maybe not trying a deal, but just throwing a name out there and seeing where things go. That's the job of an NHL GM. If you're not doing your due diligence on things like that, you're not doing your job.
And on top of it, you're trying to win, right? There's only one cup awarded at the end of the year, right? So there's only one team that's winning. I said earlier, you got to be careful with your word and everything. But at the end of the day, if you can ruse someone out, then that's the name of the game. I mean, I'm not going to say it's like the TV show Survivor, you know what I mean? But sometimes, you got to gamble, because that a lot of GMs in the morning, first thing they do when they get to the office is they contact their 4 or 5 guys that are part of their crew. You know what I mean? It's no different. Out of the 32, you're tight with, 3, 4, 5 of them. When you go to GM meetings, you guys are together. You were former teammates if you were an ex-player. For some reason, like you just connect with one another. You check in with each other every day. What have you heard? What have you heard? And you know what I mean? And then, that's kind of how you get a pulse a little bit on what's going on around the league, what's true and what's a rumor and what's real. You know what I mean? And I think that's the first thing they do is to get a sense of what's happening. And obviously, get surrounded by a great staff around you to make sure you're not missing out on anything. And a lot happens every night around the league. And Team X lost 2 Ds tonight. Maybe it's time to strike. You know what I mean? You're trying to unload Rudo. He's our extra D. Maybe that's the time. You know what I mean? And so a lot of things when you get there in the morning, that's kind of what you're doing. These things are a lot more nice than back then. There's so much you can do with your phone and communicate, and group chats are certainly part of it. Between some GMs, all the GMs. Obviously, I'm sure they have a sidebar ones of a few. Look at the Four Nations. I'm sure they had the guys that were working on the Four Nations together. So there's a bunch of different group chats. You know what I mean, that they get to, and they communicate, and they go from there. And of course, at the end of the day, your obligations to your team is to your owner, to your fan base, to your coaches and players. And again, So it's a slippery slope. Sometimes you got to be careful. You know what I mean? But the ones that are the best are, the ones that the other guys don't see coming. You know what I mean? And then next thing you know, you're in a pretzel, and and then you're like, okay, I'll do it. You know what I mean? And you're not too sure what happened. You know what I mean? And that's the beauty of negotiating and dealing. You know what I mean? With again, people's lives, right? It's not easy. It's not easy. It's not always fun, but sometimes it's out of necessity. You got to go and get a certain, player or forward or a D, and it's not nothing personal. It's just the nature of the beast.
Jamie asks, does anyone think Jack Drury could be a 2C one day in the future? Realistically, no. The offense just is not there. Not that he's a bad player. Not that he couldn't. I think he could turn into a legitimate 3C. He had in 1 year with 27 points. But his career high in goals in a season is 8. His career high in points is 27. For reference, right now, with 57 games into the season, Casey Middlestat has 32 points and 9 goals, and we're all very disappointed in his offensive output this season. So, no, Jack Drury doesn't have the offensive ability to become a 2C. That doesn't mean he's a bad player. I think, obviously, defensively, he's fantastic at center. He's a great face-off guy. I think the upside is he becomes a 3C. I don't know that he's legitimately a 3C even right now, even though that's where he's playing, and that's maybe where the Avs see him. The offense is just a little bit lacking for me to be calling him that.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's the expression I use all the time. Good player on a bad team. Meaning, no offense to the roster you're on. If you're on the second line, and I'm sure you might be produced, but your team's not making the playoffs. You know what I mean? And there's no offense to Jack. I think he's been a great addition. I love him. I think he's your typical 3C that's got an upside on putting some points and having a better 27 than a 27-point season on a team like the Avalanche. And I do not believe he is a 2C. I think it'd be a little bit too much to chew on. And I'm going to answer Jay if you know what I mean. You know what I mean? That's what I mean.
Seth in the chat asking, who do you think the Avs will most likely go for? We did a whole podcast sorting out our trade board last week. Go check that one out. Top 20 players that the Avs might be targeting. We go in depth on that in that show. So go check that one out. I do want to switch gears a little bit here, and talk about the other name that's been out there that just changed his agent today in Noah Dobson. Now, and Noah Dobson is an RFA. The agent change may well mean that they find a way to get a deal done in New York with him. But if he is available, is this something that the Avs should be looking heavily into, trying to lock up a defenseman, perhaps longer term, given that he's an RFA?
I mean, I've always liked him. I've always, obviously 2 years. 2 years ago, he had an unbelievable season, or last year, not as good this year. But again, you can't be at the top of your game. Oh, I mean, you should be. But it seems like there's something bothering him this season, in the sense that, you're changing agents in the middle of a season. There's definitely something going on. You know what I mean? Like, right? I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what is happening. He changes agencies. He's still got, what did you say, 2 years left? Is he 2 years left, or this is it?
Well, he's an RFA at the end of this year.
Yeah. I'm sorry. He's got this year left, and he's RFA. Controllable years for the team. Obviously, not happening with Lou. They don't seem to agree on the number, because what you heard last week, that he'd be moving. There's a reason for that. You don't just move a right shot defenseman of his caliber that you've homegrown for a few years. So he's just coming into his own right now, and all of a sudden you move on from him. There's reasons for that. So what is the contract? Ask or the way it was handled. Obviously, something was wrong because he switched agents. So if everything was rosy, he wouldn't have switched agents. You know what I mean? And so there's obviously something going on there. So, like you said to me earlier before the podcast, it's either you're going to see an extension here, or you're going to see a trade. And when you switch agents, I would lean more towards an extension than a trade. But what do we know, right?
Same. Yeah, you never know. if he's out there, you gotta be asking about it. Someone in chat asking about who Dobson is. If we're being realistic about it, he's a much more offensive-minded defenseman than defensive-minded. Though this year his defensive numbers have been significantly better than some of his previous seasons. So maybe he's rounding out as a defenseman if you believe in that. With less minutes, he also had some decent defensive numbers earlier in his career, but since he's moved up with Dobson, playing I think he's averaging like 24 minutes or something ridiculous this year. He's a solid D. The Avs wouldn't use him as a number one type of minute D or anything like that. Realistically, especially as a right shot, he would be on your second pairing. You probably wouldn't be getting the maximum amount of that offensive ability. Obviously, Cale Makar is going to be running power play one and things like that. But if you could get Dobson for term on a reasonable contract, you would solve your D problems, not just immediately, but indefinitely. If you're running a Dobson Girard second pairing behind Makar and Taves for the next couple of years, you would feel great about that. And Dobson isn't overly physical, but he is a big guy, listed at 6'4", only 200 pounds there. So maybe a little on the thin side, but not a small guy by any stretch of the imagination. If you believe in the defensive numbers he put up this year, if you believe he can round out that game, especially if you believe he can do that against maybe a little bit weaker competition than what he's facing every single night in New York, it would be a fantastic pickup. Now, my problem here is, one, I think the Islanders are going to sign him, like you talked about with the agent swap. But if they don't, you're realistically talking about a guy who's one season removed from a 70-point year as a defenseman, and despite being an RFA, is playing 24 minutes a night in New York. That guy's not going to be cheap, not just in trade value, but if you're looking at creating a contract extension for that guy, he's probably going to want a lot of money, especially for someone like the Avs who want to play him in a second pairing role, not a top pairing role.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there on this last point there. Can they really afford him at that number that he's asking, as a secondary guy? We all know Taves Makar there. And then obviously you'd probably have to move on from Josh if you're doing that. Or he goes down to the third. I mean, again, I'm not a mathematician.
He's a direct Josh replacement, really.
Yeah. But again, do I like him? Yeah, I love him. Do I think he'd be unbelievable to eat up some minutes on the second pair? And, absolutely. But then what makes sense? Like what makes sense for dollar wise? Again, you do have a sense, sometimes they'll give you permission, to talk to the agent when you're, doing a trade of that. Or they'll tell you, what's the asking number? Well, he wants $18 million a year. Oh, you're like, oh man. Okay. Well, we certainly can't do that. We let Mikko walk. I mean, we didn't let Mikko walk, but we traded Mikko because we didn't feel, we could sign him to a certain number. So, or sometimes they'll just let you talk to the agent and see what are we doing here? What are you looking for? You know what I mean? And does that make it work? Does that, but again, I think they end up signing him. That's just what I think. Again, I think that the play that we saw was that he changed agents. And for me, that's telling that he's going to end up signing there.
I think so too. That number is crazy. There's no way Noah Dobson gets close to 10.5. That not happening.
Yeah, I don't know.
What I will say is this. I don't know who the New York Islanders are right now. You have Lou Lamoriello, a guy who doesn't like to rebuild. You have Patrick Waugh, the head coach, a guy we know doesn't like to rebuild. So they're not it would be a weird move to ship out a guy like Dobson. On the other hand, Lamoriello has always been awfully stubborn when it comes to contract negotiations. He has his number, and if it doesn't get met, he's always been comfortable moving on to something else.
I agree with that point there, and I like Mr. Lamoriello. I do. I always say you better have some convictions than none. You know what I mean? Whether you agree with them or not, that's your prerogative. You know what I mean? As a fan, as a player, but at least he has a thought process. You know what I mean? And it's just not left, right, everywhere. You know what you're getting. You know where this is going. But like you just said, you're not too sure where they are going, but he knows. And sometimes it's a different, type of approach that we can't even figure out. But he's a savvy man, and that again. Was that done on purpose? Where all of a sudden everybody's like Brock Nesson getting traded. Dobson getting extended. Next thing you know, it flips on a dime one day. Dobson is getting traded, and we're signing Brock Nelson. Like, you know what I mean? And that's like, is that on purpose? Is that like, I don't know, maybe. You know what I mean? Again, when you've been around that long, like Mr. Lamoriello, you never know. That might have been planted in there, and who knows? But then again, I think it's telling, like we said, the agent change is kind of gives you a little bit of a where this is going.
I also just New York shouldn't have a cap problem really when it comes to getting him. Nelson's expiring at the end of the year. Palmieri's expiring at the end of the year. You have a bunch of smaller contracts expiring. Matt Martin down the list. Mike Riley. And sure, they have to make decisions. Like maybe they want to bring some of those guys back, but it would feel weird to me if the guy they're looking to move on from is the RFA. I'll put it to you that way.
Oh, again, yeah. We know what I said about Miko. So what do it's so hard sometimes to figure out. But I think this one, common sense says you keep obviously the RFA, and then you get rid of, the UFA.
Pick the UFA.
You know what I mean? Unless the UFAs come back and then he's like, nope, I know I was asking for X dollars and now I'm willing to take X dollars, and really 3 years instead of 5 I was asking. And is that true? I don't know. Again, we're not privy to those conversations. And, that's why sometimes things do change quickly. You know what I mean? And again, it's like that at free agency. Some years I've told you stories as, like you think you're getting that player. Next thing you know, they come back and they're like, oh my God, are you serious? He went somewhere else. He got an extra couple bucks here and there. And then he moved on to the other team. And you're like, you got to be kidding me. You know what I mean? When you think that it's all said and done, and it wasn't. I just dropped my earplug.
I will say this. I think it might make more sense for the Avs to target the other expiring RFA deal out of New York in Alexander Romanov, stylistically, at very least.
Oh, I love him. I love him.
But if we're talking about a guy you want to play on the second pairing, heavy defensive ability, Romanov fits that bill a lot more than Dobson does. Not that Dobson's bad defensively or anything like that, but archetypally, Romanov would be that guy a lot more than Dobson would.
Archetype, you're right. Totally different. Boy, oh boy, did he play good against the Avs the other day. You know what I mean? Like Roman, oh my God, he was all over the map. He was awesome. Got rewarded with a goal that usually, that's not really what he does, but it was a fluky goal if I'm trying to remember. Right, it got tipped or something, but still, he was physical. He was a menace. I really do. Like some pieces on that team, they just haven't been able to put it together. So maybe that's the thing too. They're moving on from, from Dobson, whoever, for all the reasons, and that's their plan, and they've been working on this for a year or sometimes 2 years or months or weeks now, or and you had a threshold. If we get to this year and we're not in the playoffs, then we got to really go on to plan X or whatever, because it's not working what we're trying to do.
What I will say is Romanov does have some questionable underlying numbers on that defensive side, but part of that is, 1, he's young. 2, I think he's still developing a little bit in that New York system. But 3, most importantly, he'd be a whole lot cheaper than Noah Dobson, both in value to get and in his next contract.
Sure.
So
yeah, asset-wise, it's not the same. Different category.
Yep.
Noah Dobson for me is in the upper echelon. You know what I mean? He is.
Yep. Agreed. All right. I think that covers most of the trade conversation that we wanted to get into today, but it is the technical official start of the Four Nations face-off here tonight. You've been fired up about it, man. I know you were so iffy about it all preseason, and now we're here, and you can't wait.
I was iffy about it. all summer long. I was like, but now I'm excited just from what I'm seeing. I'm looking forward to being there this weekend. It's moving down to the Boston area from Montreal. You know what I mean? And I'm looking forward to it. In the sense that I don't know. You're seeing the jerseys. You're seeing that the guys seem to care. Coaches have had some answers like, they expect it to be like, all the international competitions. I saw a few Swedes that look so pumped. You know what I mean? They look more pumped than their respective teams. You know what I mean? And I'm not here to throw. I just know how Swedes are. They're so patriotic about their national team. Um, and if I can say one point, as Zibanejad was saying, it's so cool for us because everything is English here, and what I mean, in the NHL, and now
Yeah.
you go back to your native tongue, and some of us played together when we were little, and it just puts a smile on your face. It makes you realize again that this game's supposed to be fun. We all know the National Hockey League is a business. Listen, I'm biased. It's the greatest league in the world, but it's still a business. And I think Zibanejad's point was, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I think sometimes he hasn't, for example, he hasn't been really good this year for the Rangers, and then he's been better the last few games. But all of a sudden, you go there and you dominate. It seems like you can't win. Because they're gonna be like, "Where's he been all year?" You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, or the opposite. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, you've been great, and you go there and you're not good. I don't know, but I'm excited for it. I'm pumped for it. I didn't think I was going to be excited. It's such a small format. It's a short format. I mean, it's 3 games, and then it's the top 2 guys teams, playing that final game, and then I understand it's not sanctioned or whatever you want to call that, and it's not the Olympics, it's not the World Cup, but I certainly like it better than World Championships, which, as you know, I complain about it every year. I think this is
Yeah.
I don't like it at all. I think it doesn't. It's stupid. I'll say it. But I understand the revenue it generates and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not against. I'm saying it's just it's like the losers championship, right? It's, oh, you got knocked off and you didn't make the playoffs in the NHL. Come on over. Where this is really like selective people. You know what I mean? Like they've been selected for their country, and unless you have an injury or like Quinn Hughes or guys are there. It's not like they're trying to be more fun if there was more teams, and we all know it's only. But again, they wouldn't be able to have that short of a tournament if there was 7, 8 teams. But for me, I just feel. I mean, it's almost puck drop. I feel that it's going to be a little more intense than I originally not a little more. I think it's going to be a lot more intense than I really originally thought this summer. Um, I do feel that a lot of those people, because of the way it's shaped out the last 7, 8 years or whatever it has been, that the best on we haven't really seen best on best, and I hate to say that because the Russians and Czechs and they're all not there, but those teams are best on best. I mean, it's not like they're the best of their country that play in the NHL. That play in the NHL, you have to add that, but I mostly that would they should be in the NHL if they're the best of their country, but whatever. And then that's why I'm saying I'm looking forward to it. Some guys have never done it because of their age or you know what I mean, it's a really nice appetizer for 2026 in Italy.
I do think one thing that I find interesting that I hadn't really thought about until recently about this tournament. Obviously, we'd like more teams and it'd be more interesting, whatever. It's on NHL ice. We're so used to these international competitions being on Olympic ice, and
Mm-hmm.
the reality is wider, bigger ice slows the game down a lot. Um, they're still unbelievably talented and make all the amazing plays and stuff, but I'm really curious to see what teams like Sweden and Finland look like on NHL ice. Now, at the junior level, we've seen a lot of this with a bunch of the Canadian juniors and juniors tournaments getting hosted in Canada. But at the
Mm-hmm.
NHL level, at the professional level, there really are not very many tournaments that get played on NHL ice. So I am a bit curious to see how that plays out.
And there's no time. There's no feeling period. This is
Yep.
like, let's go, right? It's 3 games. You know, and then it's the old format, the 3-point format, right? So
Yep.
regulation win is 3 points, obviously 2 points if you win an overtime or a shootout, and then the 1 point if you lose, and then it's the old Stanley Cup overtime rules, like sorry, NHL overtime rules, from
Yep.
playoffs, which is you play until somebody scores. There's no shootouts or for the final game. And
Yeah.
in those first few games, it's 10-minute OT. 10-minute OT, you should see a goal in there somewhere. When we say 10-minute OT, is it 3-on-3 or is it 5-on-5?
I don't know. I'd have to check. I assume it's 5-on-5, but I
I
don't actually know.
I looked and I don't remember.
If it's
I'm
a
just
10-minute
trying to
three
remember
on
because
three, chances of a goal are like 99% or something.
yeah,
ridiculous.
that's what I'm saying. They don't want to shoot out.
Yeah,
But then again, some guys make their names, with those types of tournaments. You know what I mean?
true.
And I think some guys are going to go hard. I mean, a lot of people are mad right now that Sam Bennett's a scratch for Canada. I'm reading around like it's an uproar, and they're saying, "My God, if you're bringing Sam Bennett there and you're not bringing like the Scheifele's of the world, and it's because you want him to do what he does, what he's done in the playoffs the last couple of years, and then you're scratching him." So I don't know. We'll see. People are starting to get involved and mad, and he's a 3-on-3 great. I mean, Mr. Wasted Talent 34. If it is 3-on-3, that's awesome. That's why I thought. I wasn't sure. I wrote my notes down here, but we shall see how that's going to be. But I do believe that it's going to be exciting. And I do believe that, again, it's going to bring out the best of all the players. And I think the intensity is going to be more surprising than people think.
I think you brought up an interesting topic, too, that we'll probably talk about later in the week or maybe next week about maybe some players can use this as a springboard to a good stretch of the last part of the season for them. With the Avs, it's more of a keep it rolling thing with the guys that they've sent because they've been so good already. Mm-hmm. But still, that is a conversation to be having around a bunch of these players for sure. For tonight, it's Canada versus Sweden. I know it's not really a pregame show, but you got a crystal ball prediction for me on Canada versus Sweden?
Yeah, I'm going Canada. I'm not going to say like it's not going to be crazy. People are saying, "Oh, McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby." I'm going to keep it low, so to speak. I'm going to go 3-1 Canada win. That's just what I think.
Okay. I'm here for that. I think it might be big. I think it might be more like a 5-1, 5-2 Canada.
All right.
I want to see some Cale Makar action though. He's big in these international tournaments. He's usually really good at them. So
it's Bennington versus Gustafson too. Gustafson
was
announced, right?
So. Yep. So there you go. Our poll. A lot of Team Canada, not even 10% going Sweden on this one. So Canada, the heavy favorites.
What if Forsberg was playing? Peter Forsberg.
Yeah, that would help the poll 1% maybe in Sweden's favor. I don't know. It should be fun. And, I think I'm going to try and do a watch along for the game tonight. If people are interested in that, be casual, just hanging out, watching some hockey. If that's your thing, come join me later tonight on this YouTube channel. But yeah, we'll see. The first game of the tournament, I am curious to see the pace. I'm curious to see how, especially a team as stacked as Canada, are they really going full bore, or is it a little shinny hockey? We'll see.
No, I think they're going for it. I do believe it. I do believe there's too many people behind it. I do believe they're going for it in a sense. Like I'm talking about, like doing the best they can and putting the best product out there they can. A bunch of coaches on each team. Hey, listen, it's different than the All-Star game, right? When you have Justin Bieber on the bench, and what I mean. Like this is, You're talking about like there's some strategy going. You guys have had meetings all year long on it, and that's why I'm like, okay, I'm taking back what I said last summer. I do believe that this is going to be a little more, a lot more full throttle than people think. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm looking forward to it.
It'll certainly be fun hockey to watch if that's the case. So I'm excited for it. Hopefully it starts off with a bang tonight, and then we get to watch through the rest of the tournament over the next 10 days or so. It should be fun. Keep your eyes peeled out there. I know he's going to be going to some of these games and doing a bunch of cool stuff out in Boston, so make sure you're following for that stuff. We got some other good stuff planned. Yeah, takeover right there. February 28th against Minnesota. You can get your tickets now at the DNVR/events. Come join us. It's super awesome. We can't quite reveal it yet, but I think we're going to have at least one pretty cool guest coming to that too. So should be a fun time. Come join us for that. Beyond that, this is the 2 weeks out, more than 2 weeks out warning. Puckpedia's Be a GM mode for Roast My Roster should be coming at the start of March. So start thinking about your trade deadline ideas for the Avs. Don't put them out there yet. It's way too early. But, up here, start thinking about ideas. We do have to wrap up our show, though. That is the end of the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by Bet365. We appreciate all y'all hanging out, and we'll be back talking to you tomorrow.
We all silly like the mayor.